Thank you for joining the Second Chance Act Innovations in Reentry Initiative Grant Program Orientation webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to share information about this grant program, including submission of the Planning and Implementation P&I Guide and its related timelines. We will also discuss resources that are available to support your grant and answer questions about expectations for the planning and implementation process. My name is Elizabeth English Smith. I am a policy analyst at the Council of State Governments Justice Center and will be presenting today along with Dr. Heather Tubman-Carbone, Senior Policy Advisor at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, U.S. Department of Justice. I am excited to share that we are also joined by Conor Williams, a Fiscal Year 16 Innovations in Reentry Initiative grantee. Thanks to all of you who are joining the webinar and to BJA and Conor for partnering with us on this presentation. Before getting started, I'd like to briefly talk through a couple of housekeeping items about how the webinar is going to work. At any time during this presentation, you can ask a question by typing it into the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. This includes both technical and content-related questions. We will try to reply to technical questions in the chat window as we go. For the content-related questions, we will keep a running list and address them at the end of the webinar. We will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. If you encounter technical or audio problems during this webinar, please call the WebEx technical support at 1-866-229-3239. Please understand that there are some technical issues you may not be able to resolve. For this reason, we are recording the content portion of this webinar and will post it on our website at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. We should have the webinar posted online within a week. Today's webinar will start with an overview of the Innovations in Reentry Initiative led by Heather. From there, I will speak about the NRRC and technical assistance. After that, Conor will speak about his own experience as a grantee, and then we will leave time for questions and answers at the end. I will now turn it over to Heather.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction, and to everyone else at CSG for making this webinar happen today. As you heard, my name is Heather Tubman-Carbone. I'm with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and we're so glad you're able to join the webinar today. We are very excited for you to join the fold of new Second Chance Act grantees. As you are all likely aware, BJA's goal in the field is to provide leadership and services in grant administration and criminal justice policy development to support local, state, and tribal justice strategies to achieve safer communities. BJA has been funding Second Chance Act programs since fiscal year 2009, and to date, BJA has supported over $300 million in reentry investments to a variety of initiatives across the country. The SCA portfolio includes a number of programs, all with the aim of reducing recidivism and improving outcomes for people returning to communities from state and federal prisons, local jails, and juvenile correctional facilities. A key program in achieving that goal is the one for which you have won the award, the Innovations in Reentry Initiative. IRI supports grantees in developing or expanding comprehensive and collaborative reentry strategies that improve public safety and are tailored to local drivers of recidivism. In FY18, BJA selected a total of 7 awards out of a large pool of applicants from across the country. We have a wonderful assortment of initiatives that will be undertaken by your cohort. As you can see on the slide, the 7 sites are dispersed throughout the country, and I want to give you a quick rundown of what everyone is going to be focusing on so you can figure out within this cohort who might be some folks that you want to connect with sooner or later just to see what strategies they're using and perhaps how folks overcome the problems and barriers to implementation. So first up is Bexar County Reentry Program in Texas. Bexar County is going to use its existing reentry center model and infrastructure to create a system of care focused on repeat high-risk, high-need offenders to help them transition from incarceration to the community. The City of Holyoke Police Department in Massachusetts is going to have a partnership between law enforcement and the Hampton County High-Risk Young Adult Reentry Initiative. They will help 18 to 24-year-old high-risk violent male offenders in and returning to the community. This is focusing on young men with a previous or current gun charge and a high risk of reincarceration. Then, Fort Myers Reentry Program in Florida will focus on medium and high-risk offenders over the age of 18 who are in or are relocating to the city. It will include pre-release planning in addition to post-release services to develop reentry case planning to connect clients with family and help them secure services, including those focused on employment, education, behavioral health, substance abuse, and personal and professional development workshops. Clients will also be paired with a mentor from the community for the duration of the project and beyond. Also in Florida, Broward County Sheriff's Office is partnering with the Florida Department of Corrections to continue growing its reentry program for offenders released from the DOC and returning to the county. Clients will receive services through the initiative, including a pre-release risk assessment, case planning, post-release case management, mentoring, family reunification, job placement and retention, career development and life skills, housing assistance, criminal registration, and referral to community-based providers and other services. Out in California, Alameda County's pilot program the program is called Redesigning the Pathways Home, and this is Alameda County's pilot to positive reentry. The Pathways pilot is a collaborative effort led by Alameda County Probation Department and the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Together, they're weaving together critical reentry support systems to create pathways to reentry that begin prior to release. Their target population for service is high-risk adult clients with a history of committing violent offenses. Moving back across to the East Coast, in Richmond, Virginia, we have the Retooled Comprehensive Second Chance Reentry Program. This project seeks to improve the capacity and effectiveness of reentry services to increase the success of offenders returning to their communities by expanding the Recovering from Everyday Addictive Lifestyles program. The program will use a targeted systems approach to leverage services available from a wide array of community partners throughout the reentry process. And last but certainly not least, Cuyahoga County Office of Reentry, the Reentry Initiative and Adult Transitions Model in Ohio, will focus on reducing recidivism, alleviating homelessness, increasing employment opportunities, and creating safer neighborhoods through greater systems coordination, collaboration, and identification of systems gaps and legal and administrative barriers for individuals with criminal backgrounds. Now, that is just a very quick rundown of what folks have proposed to focus on. There are certainly things beyond what I've shared, and I'm sure that as you each heard the other's description, you recognize things in there that you yourselves will be focusing on that I didn't get to mention. Throughout the course of your grant period, you'll be encouraged and you'll be supported by your technical assistance provider at the National Reentry Resource Center to connect with each other, to learn from each other. And additionally, you'll have access to, if you're interested, connect with former IRI grantees, one of whom we're lucky to have, former and current ongoing grantees, one of whom we're lucky enough to have on the phone with us today. As I previously mentioned, the Second Chance Act IRI grant has been around since fiscal year 2009, so you're joining a large group of agencies and organizations throughout the country who are dedicated to improving pre- and post-release services in their community. There have been 157 awards made, and that's over $60 million in funding across the country. From those grantees and their experiences, we've been able to identify some keys to grant success, which I'd like to highlight for you. These components have been necessary, necessary and critical to folks being successful in implementing their planned activities. First, ongoing engagement with the Reentry Task Force. The Reentry Task Force provides a key opportunity for policymakers to work together to identify and address barriers to effective reentry, including barriers that are policy or procedural in nature. And your Reentry Task Force is also the place you can go when you run into blockades, when you run into barriers, when you're banging your head against the wall because you say, I cannot make progress with this program because. That's the Reentry Task Force's job, is to help you remove those barriers and find solutions. Second, partnership with corrections for transitions planning. It is key to have a strong relationship in order to smooth transitions with successful outcomes. And that doesn't mean giving someone an address to send them down the street. I think one of the reasons you've all applied for this grant is because you realize the importance of a warm handoff. Third, collaboration with your research partner. As you know, one of the requirements of this grant is an evaluation, and that research partner is a key team member and should be engaged throughout the process. Their feedback is critical not only for the required research component, but also for your overall success. If they're tracking data throughout the process, they can give you near real-time feedback about what's working or how it's working so that you can make adjustments as needed. Fourth, a connection to those agencies that attend to health, mental health, housing, homeless services, child welfare, education, substance abuse, victim services, state child support, and employment services will provide the wraparound services needed for reentrants to be successful. We encourage you to build those connections early and to maintain and expand them as the project moves forward. Fifth and finally, active participation with your technical assistance provider at the National Reentry Resource Center is both a benefit of this program and also a requirement. You'll learn more about your TA providers from Elizabeth, but I want to say that their primary goal is to help you achieve your project goals. Maintaining communication and connection with your TA provider, whether things are going well or not so well, is key to a successful grant experience. And now a little bit about key contacts throughout the course of your grant. The different jobs within the Bureau of Justice Assistance can get a little confusing. So first, there's the Policy Office and the Programs Office. I'm standing in today for my colleague Rachel Brushett, a Senior Policy Advisor in the Policy Office at BJA. Rachel manages the policy aspects of IRI. That means the development of this funding opportunity and guiding technical assistance. Our Policy Office works closely with the state policy advisors in the Programs Office, who are responsible for all financial aspects of the grant. One way to think about this is that there's a criminal justice expertise in the Policy Office, and that's with Rachel, and the federal financial expertise in the Programs Office. And here at BJA in the Programs Office, the name you'll want to remember is Jennifer Lewis. She is the state policy advisor over this program and will be your point person on finances, progress reports, grant adjustment notices, and all other matters pertaining to your budget. A grant adjustment notice, also known as a GAN, is used to request project changes and or corrections for any programmatic, administrative, or financial change associated with your grant award. All GANs must be requested electronically through the GAN module in the Grants Management System, known as GMS. Prior to submitting a GAN, you can have an in-depth conversation with your TA provider and also with Rachel, your policy advisor, as to your particular needs for the program. Once everyone's on the same page in terms of what you think you need to do or what you want to do, you can submit those changes via a GAN through GMS, and Jennifer will ensure that you are within financial policy. A second requirement of your award is submitting quarterly performance measure data via the Performance Management Tool, or PMT. This was discussed during the SCA orientation webinar not earlier this month, but late last month. And additionally, an instructional webinar will be held to remind you of the reporting schedule and the information you should be collecting. Lastly, I'm excited to say that your TPA provider is the National Reentry Resource Center. Elizabeth is going to talk further now about the role of the NRRC and identify the specific people who will be working on your project, as well as the specific tasks they will assist with. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Heather. I will now provide an overview of the NRRC and discuss technical assistance, as Heather mentioned. The NRRC, or the National Reentry Resource Center, was authorized by the passage of the Second Chance Act in April 2008. The Second Chance Act, or SCA, is the first federal legislation to authorize federal support for reentry programs. Recognizing how complex reentry initiatives are and the importance of integrating research and evidence into those initiatives, SCA authorized the creation of a National Resource Center for Adult and Juvenile Reentry. In 2009, following a competitive process, the CSG Justice Center was selected to launch the National Reentry Resource Center and provide training and technical assistance to all other Second Chance Act grantees. We administer the NRRC in close partnership with BJA. The NRRC has provided technical assistance to over 600 juvenile and adult reentry grantees since its inception. Within the Justice Center, the NRRC is funded by BJA. On behalf of the staff of the CSG Justice Center, I again congratulate you on your selection as a Second Chance Act grantee. SCA grant programs are highly competitive and sought after, and policymakers at the federal, state, and local level are looking to SCA grantees to advance our understanding of effective reentry and recidivism reduction practices. We are wholeheartedly committed to providing support that will help you make the most of your grants, and we look forward to working with each of you as you implement your projects. The NRRC website is a great resource for grantees in the field at large. You will find a directory of our latest projects, resources, webinars, facts and trends, and items in the news. Each topic page provides links to recent research and publications and news clips about that particular subject. We are constantly adding new resources, webinars, funding opportunities, and other news to our website, and we send out a monthly newsletter that will connect you to these new resources. We encourage each of you to sign up for our newsletter, which you can do on our website. I'd like to also introduce our team of TA providers that will be assisting you during your grant process. Olivia Kukui, Blaine Stum, and myself are here to support your grant initiative. As your TA providers, we will work closely with you throughout the planning and implementation phases of your grant. TA will be tailored to each grantee and will reflect the unique elements and resources of every grantee. TA support is provided through monthly calls, site visits, trainings, and distance learning opportunities. Our goal as your TA provider is to help you meet the requirements of your grant. This is done in a variety of ways, including by providing education and learning opportunities, by sharing lessons learned across jurisdictions, in connecting you to subject matter experts, sharing relevant publications and resources on your work, facilitating conversations with federal partners, policy and procedure review and rewrites, translating research for practice, general program guidance, assisting on reporting outcomes to stakeholders, and supporting your public education efforts. As mentioned, every grantee will have a standing monthly call with their TA provider, and at times you'll be in more frequent communication. We're always available via phone and email to help guide you through your grant process. In addition, there may be commonalities across your project with past or current grantees' projects. We often use these commonalities to create peer-to-peer learning opportunities to share resources and knowledge between various grantees. As TA providers, we share evidence-based practices with grantees, promote the work of grantees, and work with BJA to promote grant management and reporting requirements. We now want to mention something new to IRI this year. For fiscal year 2018, the IRI solicitation asks grantees to choose and conduct an analysis of your systems in 2 of the following domains: behavioral health, community supervision, education, housing, or employment, including a review of current policies and practices, and to develop and implement plans to remove barriers to successful reentry. These domains are critical to keep in mind as you complete your planning and implementation guide, which we will discuss next. The Planning and Implementation Guide, referred to as the P&I Guide, enables grantees to identify the degree to which practices are in place to advance recovery and reduce recidivism in their jurisdiction. The guide is not intended to serve as a step-by-step blueprint, but rather to foster discussion on best practices, identify considerations for your collaborative effort, and help you work through key decisions and implementation considerations. You will work with your team of stakeholders and your TA provider to complete the guide in phases. Your TA provider will ask for completed sections in advance of scheduled TA calls in order to further discuss the exercises on the calls. These are the 6 sections of the P&I Guide. We'll touch on each of them briefly in the next slides. Each grant award will have in place a special condition withholding of all but $200,000, which will allow you to complete, submit, and receive approval on your guide that includes the research plan. You will receive the rest of your grant funds once your guide is approved. The first section of the guide is on identifying goals and assessing initial technical assistance needs. There may have been updates or developments since your original application was submitted. This exercise in the guide is intended to give your TA provider a sense of your current project goals and your initial technical assistance needs. Convene team members, including key stakeholders and partners, to confirm your goals and target population and to identify any revisions to your project plan since the proposal was submitted. I'd now like to speak about the logic model portion of your guide, which also comes at the beginning of the guide. Some of you may have already completed a similar activity with your team as you were preparing for the proposal you submitted. A logic model demonstrates the causal relationships between goals, activities, and results. It is a useful tool to visualize the purpose and scope of proposed activities, including the resources needed and expected outcomes. For example, as you decide upon the larger goals of your initiative, have you thought about what resources you will need to complete the activities and accomplish the objectives and goals? How long will each activity take to complete? Who will be responsible? What will be measured? These are great discussions to have with your evaluation and research partner. Developing a well-thought-out logic model will help ensure achievement of your goals. The logic model component of the guide will have 3 parts, and each will address a specific requirement of the solicitation. First, reentry needs, then your system gaps, and the domains you have selected as areas of focus for your project. This is a standard logic model template. The sample provided here walks through one goal to incorporate risk and needs assessment into case planning. This example shows the activities and responsible parties associated with this objective, participants that the objective will impact, process measures to track movement toward the goal, the long-term outcomes from accomplishing the objective, and a timeline for completing it. The timeline piece of your logic model is critical to help ensure your project is progressing as you had planned. This brings us to Section 2, Developing Collaborative Strategies in Establishing Your Task Force. The fact that you're here today represents the forward thinking of your leadership to respond to the solicitation and looking for innovations or improvements to your current reentry strategies. Establishing your task force, leadership structure, and project roles is essential for improving outcomes. Effective planning and implementation requires coordination across multiple agencies, state and local justice systems, and service providers. Your task force can help unite all system stakeholders around what works to improve reentry and increase public safety while promoting coordination across systems for data sharing, assessment, case planning, and service delivery. The task force ensures that agency leaders work together to advance and support jurisdiction-wide policy and practice changes. In this section, you will take an inventory of those partners and their roles in the initiative. This year, BJA has also included a component in the guide focused on establishing a reentry coordinator who will serve as a liaison and leader for your reentry task force. The guide includes questions and a checklist that will help you think through selecting an individual for this position. This brings us to Section 3 on your target population. As mentioned, each of your projects is unique, and your answers in this section will correspond accordingly. For example, some of you have focused your target population on transitional age youth, some on those with behavioral health needs, and some projects are gender specific. This section allows you to describe in detail the initiative's target population, asks you to identify what risk and needs assessment tools will be used, as well as other behavioral health screenings and assessments, and how the screening and assessment process will look through the development of a flowchart. Section 4 focuses on identifying evidence-based programs and supportive services, along with other supportive services that will assess participants in reentry. The discussions generated through these activities help assess what resources are available to address the needs of your target population. There are also exercises to define the process of connecting individuals to healthcare coverage, as well as an assessment of housing partnerships. Section 5 of the guide looks further at your data collection process, performance measures, and developing your evaluation plan. This slide highlights the concept of action research. In comparison to a traditional evaluation, action research is a continuous cyclical process as opposed to a linear process. It also more fully engages the practitioner of the program or intervention than a traditional evaluation would. Rather than occurring after the event, the research is happening in real time and providing feedback to you so that adjustments can be made along the way as needed. The activities in this section help define the questions you will answer through your evaluation process. And this brings us to Section 6 of the guide, which is focused on sustainability. Sustainability is difficult to achieve and becomes even more challenging if neglected until the grant funding is coming to an end. Developing a sustainability plan at the onset is essential to building a strong initiative that can continue after the grant funding concludes. Connect sustainability to your evaluation. Data you collect will help you document outcomes to make the case for your continued work after the grant period. Sustainability is the last section of the P&I Guide. Then your full completed P&I Guide will be due to your TA provider on July 12, 2019. This was just a brief overview of the P&I Guide and how completion of each activity will help shape your project to include the elements found to be successful. At this point in our webinar, I would like to introduce Conor Williams, an economic policy analyst at Community Advocates Milwaukee, and as we mentioned, a fiscal year 2016 Innovations in Reentry Initiative grantee. He will speak about his own experience so far as a Second Chance Act Innovations in Reentry grantee. Conor, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and congratulations on being awarded grants to do innovative work to promote justice in your communities. We here in Milwaukee, where the Wisconsin grant was awarded, have a high incidence of firearm violence, and it's particularly concentrated in a part of Milwaukee called the Center Street Corridor. And we have an innovative intervention that is based on through the lens of trauma, of working with 75 medium to high risk individuals in the 12 months prior to release from state prison, for them to do some work with an agency that we have here called the ALMA Center that has got very good expertise in originally developed in working with men who are convicted of domestic violence and helping those men to understand the reasons why they engaged in violence. And the work is done with the 75 young men in prison who have a high probability of returning to the community and re-engaging in firearm violence. The work is done with peer guides who work at the ALMA Center, and these are men who themselves have successfully transitioned the path from incarceration to reentry. So they speak with some authority with the individuals that they work with in prison. So there's 12 months of programming that is done with these 75 individuals prior to incarceration. Then upon release, and these individuals have just started being released now, we're about one full year into our implementation phase of our project. These individuals are welcomed home in a welcome home ceremony where they're celebrated, and what they have to offer the community is celebrated, and they are supported with new possibilities for their lives. And then post-welcome home ceremony, these individuals are accompanied by these same peer guides for 12 months of accompaniment, where they are encouraged and cajoled and to take the small incremental offers of help to rebuild, to build a healthy life for themselves. We were very grateful for the assistance that we received from the Council of State Governments in the first 12 months of our project in the creation of the Planning and Implementation Guide. In our interaction with CSG, they're very helpful in being very specific about details, validated assessment tools to use for things like behavioral health issues and substance abuse disorders, and they are a very helpful entity. The TAs are, and I'd encourage you to reach out to them as you're going through the comprehensive process of the Planning and Implementation Guide. We're about 1 year into implementation, and we continue to use CSG as a technical support. In addition to the particular intervention that I described here in Milwaukee, we, as part of the Second Chance Act, had to create a reentry task force. We call our reentry task force the Milwaukee Reentry Council, and it sits as a body under a local body that we have, which is connected with Milwaukee County government, and it's a local Community Justice Coordinating Committee. It's important that our reentry task force is tied into a formal process of established bodies, because the reentry task force itself does not have authority to change state law and, in some cases, regulations that relate to the Department of Corrections, but we have the ability to request people who are in positions of authority, who sit on the Community Justice Coordinating Committee, to do so, and that's helpful. One additional focus of our Smart Reentry grant here is our long-term objective here is to significantly increase and deepen community involvement in the space of reentry, so that men and women coming back from incarceration are not as socially and economically isolated as they currently are, with the conviction that by the community embracing them prior to release, upon release, and post-release, we increase the probability that they will be successful in their reentry, and not only will they as individuals benefit, but we as a community will be safer also. That's just an overview of our work.
Great. Thank you so much, Conor.
Great.
For those on the webinar, now is your opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. Please enter questions into the Q&A panel box, and we'll get to as many as we can, and we'll be sure to follow up with you on any questions that we don't get to into our limited time left. So we already have one question that just came in, and Conor, this is actually for you. This person asked, how did you decide who should be on your task force?
It's a good question. We wanted to see that there was representation from the federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, and also county law enforcement. So that was important. In the Second Chance Act and also in our application for Smart Reentry, there are specific categories of agencies that are listed, and it's very comprehensive. And a lot of it is built around the needs of people coming back from the community. We recently here had a gentleman, I've forgotten his name now, he's a professor at Columbia University who just wrote a book called Homeward. He spoke about the three most significant needs for people returning from incarceration are health care, housing, and income. And so we made sure that agencies or entities that can help with those specific needs are well represented on the task force, as is the faith community. So we've tried to make our reentry task force as broad as possible to meet the specific needs of the reentry population.
Great. Great. Thank you, Conor. We have another question here, which I think can be directed at Heather. This question is, when should we start working on securing our reentry coordinator that's outlined in the solicitation?
That is a great question. There's two answers here. I would say you should start thinking about it now, and I'm sure you're all already thinking about it. But as Elizabeth mentioned, there's that special withholding condition that your funds will not be fully released until the P&I Guide is complete. So walking back from that, I want to flag a couple of steps. So always have in your mind sort of the qualifications you're looking for. If there are folks within your agency or within your jurisdiction that you want to start talking to, that's fine, but you won't be able to spend money until a few things are complete. And depending upon your procurement rules, that may mean, or your hiring rules, that may or may not impede on your ability to post the position. So what you'll have to do is once your final budget is approved by BJA, you'll get final budget clearance, and that should happen within the next few months. I apologize, a few months does sound like a very long time for that to happen, but we're working on a bit of a backlog here. So that will happen, and then you'll start working on your planning and implementation guides, and then those will be approved and the remainder of the funds will be released. At that point, you'll have the money to do everything you have planned to do. Now, if in your budget you had the money to hire the coordinator and that falls under the special withholding condition amount, then you can potentially start work on that sooner. I realize as I'm saying this, it is not the clearest answer in the world. The reality is that some of it depends on how quickly our BJA and frankly above us within OJP can move to clear the budgets, and then also how you propose it and how much money you need. So I'd encourage you to reach out to Jennifer Lewis, whose information you saw on an earlier slide, to talk specifically about your proposal, your budget, and your timeline. And you never have to hesitate, certainly, to reach out to the NRRC with this stuff, or as I said, I'm standing in for my colleague Rachel Brushett today, and she can field those questions to talk specifics of your program as well.
Great, thank you so much, Heather. We have another question here, which is also probably for Heather. This person asks, can grantees address more than 2 domains in their grant projects?
Oh, absolutely. What we have the solicitation, those are the requirements both of the Second Chance Act and then of this particular funding opportunity. We would encourage you to do what you believe needs to be done for your jurisdiction and for your population. So yes, please go forth, do great, and tell us all about it. We want to be, we want to support and we want to publish about the amazing work that you do.
Great, thank you, Heather. We'll give everyone another couple of seconds here. It looks like we just received one more question, so just 1 second, we'll ask that in 1 moment. This question says, if there are funds remaining after the planning stage, can they be applied to the implementation budget?
Absolutely. The grant money, once you pass that planning and implementation guide milestone, those grant funds are yours to pursue the activities that you have proposed. If something takes less money, you'll want to make sure that you maintain your compliance with the financial rules and policies and all the good regulations that come with getting such an exciting grant opportunity. And that's where Jennifer on the BJA team can be super helpful, which is to say that money is yours for the grant. So if it means that you have a little more money to put into a different activity, you can absolutely do so. You just need to make sure that you complete the proper forms, and that's where Jennifer will help you out.
Great. Thank you, Heather. We'll take a last call here for any other questions. Any questions you may have for Heather or Conor, please feel free to ask. It's a great opportunity to do so. All right. Well, I think with that, we're going to conclude our webinar today. I'd like to give a special thanks to Heather Tubman-Carbone of BJA and Conor Williams of Community Advocates Milwaukee, and to Keisha Dupree at the CSG Justice Center for her technical assistance in creating this webinar. Remember to take time to sign up for the NRRC mailing list for key resources. And also, when you exit out of this webinar in a moment, you will see a follow-up survey. Please take a minute to complete it to help us improve our processes in the future. This concludes our webinar today. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to working with you. Have a good one.